Regrettably, I'm about to cause trouble. Written and narrated by Amie McNee. Chapter 21. The next 2 weeks were not as enlightening as I'd hoped. Rufus was hardly talking to anyone. Zita, whilst being less of an old nag, didn't tell me any stories of court or my mother, despite my asking. A lot. "You'll find all about court when you get there," was her response, every single time. I hardly even saw Hildy. The whole village came down with a hard-hitting sniffles. I was dispensing and treating townspeople from dawn until dusk, and we were run off our feet right up until the day we left. They had curled my hair with a hot rod. My hair. So that it was even curlier than my natural hair. I had asked to retrieve my old wardrobe from beneath my floors, but was quickly reminded that I was not attending court as a courtier. I was attending court as a witch. So I was dressed in a black dress, and my pockets were filled with trinkets I could charm. I clinked and chinked as I walked, but I felt beautiful in my own way, as Rufus helped me up into the carriage. Hildy and Zita looked stunning. Witchly, but stunning. Zita's hair was netted back like a true courtier's, and Hildy was in a pale blue dress, not unlike the one I had soiled in the forest. Her cheeks were bright pink, and she flustered as she sat down opposite me in the carriage and clapped her hands together. "I love this time of year," she said delightedly, handing me a tub of blackberries she had picked that morning. "Carriage snack." I took a few, and they bled all over my fingers. I was glad I was wearing black. Zita sat next to her wife and took her hand contentedly. "Rufus, hurry!" He was lingering at the carriage step. "Be with me," I demanded. Reluctantly, he stepped up and sat next to me, crossing his arms. "Blackberry, Rufus." He shook his head curtly. "To Hampton Court," squeaked Hildy. Her enthusiasm was catching. I couldn't wipe the smile off my face. We were breaking up the ride into 2 days, staying the night in an inn so we would be well rested when we arrived at Hampton Court. I had been excited about the trip to London, and the first leg was pleasant enough, eating carriage snacks and playing card games and winding up the cat. But in the inn that night, and on the second day of travel, I fell into a quiet, internal panic. "Neither of you have said a word in over an hour," said Zita, looking across at the fairy and me. "Hildy and I are bored." We were both staring at the carriage floor. "You look like you're both being carted off to the tower." "Mayhap we are," Rufus whispered. I picked my cat up and held him close to me. "Codswallop," Zita snapped. "Both of you are being dramatic." "I know a lot of people at court, Zita. What are they going to do when they see me there?" I had thought about it before, of course, but the closer we got to London, the more terrifying it seemed. "No one is going to accuse you of your little faux death, if that's what you mean. Your parents will be shocked, but I thought you'd enjoy that. I thought you'd find it fun." I grunted. "It could be fun," I conceded. But what about Beckett? I had become everything he had accused me of. This was what made me feel sick. He had said that a witch is what I was, and now it was what I was. I was a witch. What if his words had been prophecy? "He suckles at your teat." I was cradling Jimmy like a baby, stroking his black tummy. I should have put him down. I didn't. "Trust me, all will be well." Zita turned to Hildy, who had a more sympathetic look on her face. "Look at us, Hildy, bringing the dead to Henry's court." "We've resurrected only the truly worthy," Hildy added. I tried to smile. The smell outside changed. A dirty, sooty fog wafted into the carriage, and I began to worry I might be sick with nerves. "When we get there, Maude, stay close. It will be busy," Zita instructed. My tummy turned over and over. The carriage slowed in the London traffic. Rufus reached for something in his pocket and pulled out a bright green piece of cloth. He sighed and began wrapping the bright piece of material around his head in a turban. I watched him. I didn't know if it was appropriate to ask. "Is that what you normally wear at court, Rufus?" I asked finally. He nodded. "Is it from your home?" "It is a Moor's traditional uniform at court." "Moors are from the north of Africa and Spain," I said, recalling something my tutor had once told me. He said again. His bad mood had gone to his bones. "Is that where you're from?" "No." "So why are you wearing it?" "Because the people at court are dunderheads." "I see." "We are close to the gates," said Hildy. "Are you ready to be a curiosity, Maude?" he asked me. I put my head out the window, and the red-bricked beauty rose above me. Not even Rufus's determined skepticism and melancholy could stop me experiencing the awe. I made eye contact with one of the terracotta Roman emperors carved into the wall. A man in livery stopped the carriage and spoke to the driver. Then he appeared at the window. "Your summons," he said, his long nose wrinkling in apparent distaste at the newest arrivals. Piffle. He hadn't been personally invited by the King of England to court. He only worked for the king. Zita handed him the ornate parchment. He unravelled it and took some time perusing it. "The Moor hasn't been invited," he said finally. I looked to Rufus, panicked, but he was calm, bored almost. "His Majesty will be pleased to see me. I am Reasonable Blackman, his trumpeter." "I must needs check," the man said dully. "Wait here." "A trumpeter?" I asked. Rufus raised an eyebrow at me. A man, different from the one before, appeared at the carriage. "Aye, that is the trumpeter." "You absolutely certain?" the gatekeeper said. The man nodded. "Reasonable, isn't it?" "It is. I've been away, and the king will be curious to see me." "No doubt. He's been most displeased with his replacement trumpeters. He's gone through several. Let him in." The gateman sighed and signalled to open the huge wooden doors. It was everything I had imagined. All the stories my brothers had told me, all the chatter about the fountains, the clothing, the noise, the smell. It was all true. It felt like we were a boat entering a body of water, a lake of russet with ripples of blue crimson and gold damask. The light bounced off the water, the bejewelled necklines glinting at me. The carriage moved with the current to the left-hand side of the court. Now that I looked closer, I could determine who were servants and who weren't. I knew that the grooms and pages were in the bright red. They bustled around with trunks and packages. The higher-ranking officials, like the one approaching the carriage just now, were in dark red. This would be a yeoman. Zita handed this yeoman the summons. He nodded genially. "Your rooms will be in here, in base court. Just get your carriage to pull up next to the doors." We began to organise ourselves as several pages had swarmed the carriage. Someone helped me down. I relished offering him my hand and stepping down like Queen Anne herself. I watched as they bustled with our trunks and began lugging them off to our quarters. Rufus was still in the carriage, resting his head on the back of the seat, staring up at the ceiling, completely dejected, as if he were about to be hanged. "Rufus, would you stay close in these crowds?" I asked, knowing his instincts to protect me would get him moving. Slowly, he slunk his body up and out of the carriage. He stood beside me. "Just this way," said another small boy in the royal red. As its name foretold, the base court was the basest, the nearest to the exit, but our lodgings was the closest to the gates to the next courtyard, which must mean we were the very highest of the base court. "Those are the Anne Boleyn gates," Hildy said. "He made them for her when they got married. We'll take you through them later." She smiled and squeezed my hand. Rufus sighed heavily. "You're really killing my mood, Ruf," I said crossly. The page unlocked a door and let us into our lodgings. "It's primitive, as always, but it will do," said Zita, directing the pages to put the trunk down at the end of the bed. It wasn't primitive. Not really. The bed had 4 posts, like back at Sherburn. I had sorely missed my bed curtains. I liked feeling cocooned while I slept. The walls were dark wooden panels, and we had a tapestry and a fireplace. Verily, the tapestry didn't have gold thread, and it depicted a simple agricultural scene with a single lonely sheep, but it was regal, in a homely way. It was probably the king's personal sheep. And no, the mantel was not adorned with intricate engravings, but it was lovely, and the fire was already lit for our arrival, which meant the king was expecting us. The King of England was expecting me. "We'll sleep in this room. You'll be through here." "This isn't my bed?" I asked, disappointed. "Nay." Zita opened the door to the next room. It was smaller than the first, undoubtedly the children's room. The bed was short, and there was absolutely no room for Rufus, but it still had curtains and a fireplace. No sheep tapestry, but I didn't need a stupid sheep watching me as I slept. "Where will you sleep, Rufus?" I asked, jumping up onto my mattress. Zounds, it was soft. "If you don't mind, I might just go here, in front of the fire, or perhaps in front of Zita and Hildy's fire." I slid off the bed. "You won't get a room?" "I was not invited." "What about where you slept before you ran away?" "I slept in the kitchens." "You did?" He shrugged. "I was offered rooms eventually, but I had made a good spot, right behind the big fireplace, and the cooks woke me up with the smell of fresh bread, and they let me eat the offcuts. It was nice." He shrugged again, defensive. He itched at his turban. How long were you in the king's company? A very long time. Zita walked in. Oh, you have a view into the clock tower court, she exclaimed, going over to the window. I gasped and followed her over. It's almost as though I'm higher status than you, Zita. Maude, I know you're excited, but you're sounding like your mother. Remember who you are. Her words physically pushed me back onto the bed. I became very quiet. I was just playing. She turned from the window to me. I know you enjoy taunting me, but I also know that you've waited longer and with more longing than most to get to court. I want you to understand that you are in for a nasty surprise. Rufus, in a fit of annoyance, an apparent fit of itchiness, threw his turban on the floor. He scratched his head furiously. Zita walked softly over to him and reached up to touch his shoulder, and he stilled as if she had cast a spell over him. If His Majesty is angry, we will run with you, she whispered. Rufus bent his head, resting his forehead on top of Zita's head. I had not understood the stress he had been under. We sat there for a few moments, Zita stroking Rufus's shoulder, Court whirling around outside. Hildy entered the room. Summers is here, she said. William? Rufus asked, finally lifting his head off Zita. Reasonable? A male voice came from the other room. Rufus's mood changed instantly. Summers! He squeezed past Hildy and we followed him out into the front room. The two men embraced. I couldn't see the visitor's face, but he was wearing bright blue stockings and an elaborate green tunic with a hood. I've missed you, Reasonable! He was saying the phrase repeatedly, not letting go of Rufus. I have missed you, Reasonable! I have missed you, Reasonable! Rufus gently disentangled himself, and I saw this William Summers. Everyone thinks you're dead, including I, until a moment ago when I heard your voice. I am alive, Will. It was a misunderstanding, Rufus assured his friend. William Summers had such bright blue eyes they looked ethereal, as if he were not entirely of this earth. I wondered if he was an actual fairy. You must be the new witch, Maude. His gaze was penetrating. I am. This is William Summers, explained Rufus, the king's fool. William gave a very, very low bow. I returned the gesture. I had heard of the king's gesture. A natural fool, they called him, half his mind in heaven, closer to the gods, and Henry liked him that way. What exactly are your powers, Maude? I am a reader of the people, and a charmer, I explained. You read people's fortunes or emotions? He asked seriously. Emotions, I suppose, or their situations. I give advice. It trailed off. I see, he said, smoothing down his green pleated skirts. And what sort of charms do you provide? Whatever the patron might need. If he is unlucky in love, I might give him a chalice that gives him confidence with his fancy. What sort of charms do you use? What talismans? Show him, Zita interjected. I delved my hand into my pocket and showed him the bunch of trinkets. An old brooch, a spoon, a feather, a bit of wool. He approached me carefully and looked into my hand. What is this? He asked. That's a bit of cloth. From what? I think it's from an old dress. Your dress? Yes, I said, though I had no idea. Do you have a witch's mark? He asked suddenly. Zita's is on her hand and Hildy's is deep in her ears. We cannot see Hildy's, but the gods can. That is why she cannot hear. Do you have a witch's mark? He repeated. I do. He waited, then pressed. Where is it? Will you show it to me? I looked to Rufus. Be brave, Maude. I have one all over the front of my body. I gestured vaguely. Draw an outline. William wasn't being aggressive or even rude. He just seemed very curious. The witches were watching me intently, neither surprised nor judgmental. I outlined my mark, tracing from the tops of my thighs into the weird way it squiggled over my hips and up over to the bottom of my belly. Right over your privates, he whispered, in awe. No wonder you are good at giving advice on loveless marriages. You should find clothes that let you show it off for the evenings. I would be naked, I said quickly. I suppose you would, William nodded. The king will like it very much. I looked to Hildy this time, wondering if she was catching what he was saying. Either she hadn't read his lips or she was entirely unbothered, for she nodded kindly and smiled at me. Summers, we have a small issue with Maude. You do? I asked, surprised. Perhaps their knowing about my mark had changed their minds about me. Her mother and father are courtiers here, as is her estranged husband. I gaped at her. So we just tell people my deep, dark secrets now, do we? She is presumed dead by most. I see, said Summers, thinking. Do her kin believe her dead? Nay, her husband and kin know it was faked. What is her husband's name? Edward Beckett. His eyes flickered fast, as though he was checking a list of courtiers that no one else could see. He is here. Bile rose to my mouth. Will he make trouble if he sees her? He might, Zita said. I'll see what I can do. What on earth could he do about that? Thank you, William. And what is on the cards for this evening? The usual Christmas Eve? Asked Zita. The usual Christmas Eve. No big feast. Everyone is still fasting. But the king wants scary stories told by scary people in the evening. I have, of course, recommended you, Hildy. Hildy nodded. And the rest of the 12 days? Would you like to know everything that is planned or just the exciting things? He asked seriously. His mood bounced from playful to deadly serious. It was disconcerting. The exciting things, Zita said. Would you like to know what I am doing or what court is doing? The court, please. The king, the queen, you, or the courtiers? There was another knock at the door. William, are you in there? My keeper is here, he said plainly. A woman opened the door and moved inside. She was the sternest, most severe-looking woman I had ever seen. She had a deeply furrowed brow and grey eyes. Ah, you found the witches, she pursed her thin lips. Has he relayed the schedule? I am just about to explain the schedule, William said. Hurry along, then. William took a deep breath. Tonight is our last feast where we fast. Then it is expected that the members of our community will tell ghost stories to the courtiers. Christmas Day, we have 3 masses, then the Yuletide feast. Pageantry is then every single night until 12th night. Special occasions include a play on the 2nd, 4th, and 5th nights. An acrobatic performance is on the 8th. As per tradition, on the 8th day of Christmas, there is the hunt and then the presentation of gifts to the king. I have heard rumours of a large and boisterous game of blind man's bluff is to happen on the 10th day. And then there will be the final large feast on the 12th day of Christmas. You are expected to attend all major feasts and all the festivities. You may set up tarot tables or healing booths within the fountain court or within the clock tower court. Upon invitation, you are allowed to enter the King's Gallery and the Queen's Gallery, but the right of entry there is not to be assumed. William nodded his head curtly, then turned on his heel, ready to leave. Oh, and reasonable. Rufus and William looked at each other. You should go join the other musicians. William's carer hustled him out of the room. I'd barely heard the timetable, still sunk in the moment of revealing my mark. I felt shaky. I had just been stripped naked, it seemed, and had the world see my shame. I don't know why I'd just told them all, just like that. William had asked, and I had told. I didn't want to look the witches in the eye. I didn't want to talk about it. Or did I? I was just standing still, staring at the door. Is it why he rejected you? Asked Zita. Aye, I said tightly. I felt Hildy's presence at my side. I looked down at her, and she reached out her small hand and put it on my belly. No wonder you have so much power, Maude. Yes, Zita agreed. It makes a lot of sense. Why didn't you tell us? I don't tell anyone. I glanced at Rufus, wondering if he would betray me, but he just smiled. There have been a lot of secrets in this little family, declared Zita. Evening fell. I sat on Zita and Hildy's bed. They were redoing my curls. In front of me, I watched the flames licking up and around Rufus's body. He was sitting on the hearth, staring into the fire. I made eye contact with the sheep on the tapestry. She was laughing at me. Ever since William left, I had begun some sort of spiralling crisis. I was rolling down a hill, getting faster and faster, and I couldn't see anything but the spinning of the grass beneath me. All will be well, said Hildy, reading my mind as usual. The king will like you. What if I see my brothers? They are undoubtedly here. What do I do? What do I do when I see my mother? What happens if the king wants me to charm something for them? I don't know what to do when I'm addressed by the Queen of England. What if I lose track of where you are and I get lost? Maude, said Zita sternly. Our kin have seen me at court most Yuletides and have simply pretended not to know me. You have nothing to fear. Think of it this way. You do not have any brothers, nor do you have a mother or a father. You have us and the stars looking after you. We are your family. It was as if someone had jumped out in front of me to stop me rolling. She had stilled me in the middle of ever-escalating motion. I took a deep, sobbing breath. You are my family. We are your family, echoed Hildy, signing it with her hands to confirm. I looked to Rufus, who touched his heart. Family, he mouthed. We are your only kin. Zita took hold of my chin to look at my hair from the front. In your past life, you were raised to be in court. You know better than any of us how to behave in front of royalty. She spoke true. I had been trained for this for some time. What will they do when they see me? I asked her. Probably panic. What will you do? She squinted at me. I won't panic? Exactly. You will take a big, deep breath and remember how powerful you are and how nobody can make you small. I breathed. You are a powerful charmer, Hildy whispered into my ear. You will find family here, Maude, and I do not mean your dead family. William will always be looking out for you, and so will the Queen's fool, Jane. They take care of us here. Us? You'll see.